This weekend, I sold at a local show called the Raleigh Trading Card Game Convention. The selling experience at this show was very different than the other local shows that I've done. But before we break down the day and go over the sales and how successful or not successful I was, let me give you guys an overview of the inventory that I brought to sell at the show. First things first, I'm going to be bringing two different binders. Most of the binders are modern Japanese. One of the binders has some modern English promos and a little bit of vintage Japanese. We're going to just quickly spin through these. I'll show you guys what I'm bringing. What I have figured out works pretty well for me at these shows is low cost singles. So I have a lot of character rares and art rares, different classic collection cards, Radiants. You're going to see some EXs and just ultra rare cards that are like $10 or less. A lot of times I'll have kids run up to the booth and start flipping through binders, and their parents will be like, all right, you got $10, you got $20 to spend today, so make it count. And then they'll go through and they'll pick out, 10 to, 7 to 10 cards or something to fill out their 20 bucks, and then they'll move on. And that seems to be a trend that happens quite a lot at these shows, at least for me. And what better for inexpensive cards, in my opinion, than art rares, character rares, those beautiful full artworks. So I actually sourced a bunch of these recently. I think I sourced like 700 and some of these for like 500 bucks, kind of around that 70 to 75 cents per. And as you can see, a lot of them sell for like $2 or $3. So to me, pretty decent margin on lower cost singles. And a lot of this stuff is definitely going to sell. If I was a betting man, I would say that I'll probably sell out of most of these binders before I sell 5 graded cards. That has kind of been the trend, especially at local events. Lots of people looking for low-cost raw stuff, and not a whole lot of people looking for kind of those finalized items. Those items that have been taken and put in their final resting place, that plastic slab. So I feel like this is going to do very well. That is my modern Japanese one. Let me show you the English and vintage and stuff. All right, here's my modern English / vintage binder. We're gonna flip through this quick. I did not know that a lot of these Pokemon Center exclusive promos were as expensive as they were. So I had been kind of just hanging on to a bunch of them that weren't gradable. And look at that, they're like 20, 30, 10 bucks. A lot of these are the Pokemon Center exclusives. We've got the Lechonk, we've got the Iron Bundles, we've got all that stuff. We've got some more promos coming into this section, some 151 promos. We have that nice Scarlet and Violet ETB promo, some Rayquazas. Then we just have some more promos and things from Classic Collection, for instance. And then we're moving into just some reverse holos and holos set cards of like legendaries and other popular Pokemon. This Light Arcanine was just hiding in a binder. It's pretty messed up. It's pretty much damaged. But even damaged, it sells for a decent little price. So we're going to send that off as well. We've got some more English vintage stuff here. Some Kangaskhan, some Venomoth, Vileplume, stuff like that. And then we've got some 25th anniversary. We've got some more promos. Some really nice looking modern Japanese rainbow rares, full arts. And then we start sliding into the vintage here over on this side after we get past the rest of these kind of mid-era / modern cards. Now we're getting into this mid-era holos from Japanese. We've got some nice, just some popular Pokemon and some legendaries, stuff that came in from Bai and just wasn't there for grading. So I'm just going to try and sell them as singles. We've got some old back Japanese here in the back as well. And we finish out the binder with some old back Japanese and some non-holo cards of Zapdos and Jolteon, some evolutions to finish out the binder here in the back. Next up, let's talk about graded cards. So something that I've done at my last 2 shows now are I've had these kind of bulk bins of graded cards less than $50. So this allows me to put a bunch more graded cards on the table than I normally would if I was just using my display cases. And it allows people to kind of sift through a bunch of different cards, look for particular Pokemon that they want to buy, and then go ahead and purchase those from me. In the past, I've separated them out by type or species or popularity, but this time I specifically did alphabetical order. I feel like a lot of people asked me in my last show, are they sorted a particular way or not? And I was just like, no, it's just kind of by species or popularity or whatever. This time I'm doing alphabetical order so that it's much easier for people to sift through and find that specific Pokemon that they'll be looking for. And we've got all sorts of stuff from like the most ultra modern promos and set cards to some mid-era to some more ultra modern stuff. I don't think there's a whole lot of like vintage. We've got some classic collection. We've got all sorts of stuff here, but most of it is going to be mid-era to ultra modern. That's typically where I reside. I don't do a whole lot of old back Japanese. The Preza case is full of cards that are over $50. So these are the ones that are going to go into the display cases. I've got 2 of these display cases that you can buy off of Amazon. They're just like sports card display cases or whatever they're called. And I think they fit between like 30 to 60 graded cards. I'm not, depending on how you overlap them and how you set them up in there. I've got 2 of those that fit pretty well across an 8-foot table. So those are going to be what's going to display those graded cards, $50 or more. Last but not least, I have these here. I did just today, and the show is tomorrow, receive a big PSA return. I have a bunch of high grade, high value, like Charizards and stuff. So I'm gonna be making a video on this return, but I'm also going to be prepping these for this show tonight, kind of some last minute prep. So one thing that I'm gonna be doing for this show that I haven't done before is I'm going to be selling sealed product. Now in the past, I have sold packs, but never sealed boxes. And for this particular event, I'm gonna be selling Japanese sealed boxes, which is definitely something that I haven't thought about selling before. But right now, Japanese sealed boxes are fairly easy to come by for decent prices. So there's a little bit of margin on stuff if you can get stuff directly from Japan and then sell it in person. So we're gonna try and do that with some of these new sets that haven't come out yet. We've got Cyber Judge and we've got Wild Force, 2 sets that aren't yet out in English, so I feel like they might move a little bit better in person. And then we also have a case that I bought of Shiny Treasure EX. So obviously the most recent specialty set from Japan has all those beautiful shining cards as well as a shining Charizard. So hopefully these sell. I think I'm going to try and move Cyber Judge and Wild Force at about $55 a box. And I'm going to try and move Shiny Treasure EX at about $60 a box, but I'll be willing to negotiate, you know, a few dollars here and there for people. It's a little bit higher than what is online, but hopefully convenience, ease of access, don't have to worry about getting scammed on eBay or buying from a Japanese website. So hopefully people are willing to pay just a little bit more for that security. So as I alluded to in the intro, this was a very different selling experience than my previous experiences at local shows. One of the weird things about this particular show was the building that it was in. It was a complete circle. It was really strange. It's located at the fairgrounds in Raleigh, North Carolina. And this show was different from Collecticon or some of the Comic-Cons that I've done locally, because this show had not only a vendor section, but it also was running tournaments all day for different card games. And at first I thought this was a genius idea and a great way to get a lot of the players to walk around the different tables and be picking up singles and stuff that they wanted to use in their decks for the day. Or if they were collectors and players, they would be going around looking for the given card game that they wanted to collect. So it was bringing in the players to then walk around the merchant tables and hopefully pick some stuff up and buy some stuff. The way that they laid this out inside the building was cool, but then it also was kind of weird. So they basically split the building down the middle. So when you walk in the front door, you're right basically at the center of this circular building, and then they split it straight down the middle to like a back loading dock. And on the right hand side of the building, there was all of the tables for the tournament. So there was a whole bunch of tables lined up, and those tables, when they were actually running tournaments, those tables were full all day. It was super cool to see so many people coming out to play in the actual tournament itself. And then on the left half of the building was all of the vendor tables, and there was vendor tables all the way at the front, and they basically went all the way to the back. I think there was something like 30 or 35 vendors, and I myself grabbed 2 tables because I wanted to try kind of a different show. I knew that there was going to be tournaments, so I thought that that was going to bring a more collector crowd. I brought all of my graded cards and a bunch of singles and binders, and I was hoping for the best. So with this whole tournament vendor dynamic, one of the things that I thought wasn't so great from a Pokemon selling perspective is they weren't running any tournaments for Pokemon. All of the tournaments were either Magic, I think there was some One Piece, I think there was maybe Lorcana and Yu-Gi-Oh, but I don't think they ran a single Pokemon tournament. So the people who were coming into play were players of other TCGs, like Yu-Gi-Oh, like Lorcana, and then when they went to the vendor tables, the entire vendor section was Pokemon. So obviously there's going to be cross-contamination. There's going to be people who collect a bunch of different TCGs, Yu-Gi-Oh people buying Pokemon cards, Magic people buying Pokemon cards. But a lot of times people would walk around and they'd be like, you have One Piece? Do you only have Pokemon? Do you have Magic? So it was weird that like, you wanted a bunch of vendors of Pokemon, but the actual tournaments you were running weren't any Pokemon tournaments. So you were bringing people in for other TCGs, and you were trying to sell them a different TCG. So in terms of that really kind of created, I think, a clash and negatively impacted some of the sales that I believe I could have had if more of those tournaments were actually Pokemon players. Also, I think the way that they set up the vendor tables on the left-hand side of the building was a little bit chaotic. There were large gaps in between kind of the sections that they put us in. They did put you in sections similar to Collecticons, but in Collecticons, there's maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 very small gaps to get in and out of the actual section. But here, it was a big floor, and they had big tables, but they also put big gaps in between section spaces. So frequently we actually had people walking through our section, like just randomly walking through our section and then being like, oh crap, this isn't a walkway, because of the way it was set up. It seemed like it didn't have a very consistent flow. Like it wasn't like they had vendor tables and then vendor tables and then vendor tables. So there was this, you kind of started at the front, wrapped your way around and wrapped your way around. I feel like I've been at conventions in the past where that is very much, they try to get you to flow one way, so you're looking at, so it's kind of a corridor, you know, in and out, where you get a good walkthrough and you get to see on both sides all the tables. This was more like this weird zigzaggy pattern all the way through, and then kind of an outside loop, and then, you know, those big gaps in between the tables that people could just like randomly walk through. So I don't think it was necessarily laid out in a very conducive way that led people around to look at all the tables. It ended up being very front heavy, where there was a lot of people at the front, and a lot of people didn't actually make it to the back half of the vendors, which was where my table was, unfortunately. So let's talk about what sold and what didn't sell. One thing that's always done really well for me at these local shows is binders, raw cards, low-cost raw cards. I had 2 binders full of awesome low-cost Japanese singles that typically do really well at these shows. No one barely even looked at them. I had one whatnot seller come through and buy a few pages of old back Japanese cards that I've been sitting on for a while, so that was good to get rid of those. But otherwise, there really wasn't that many people going through the binders and actually looking for singles. Most of my sales came from graded cards, which usually, I am not saying that at all. I didn't even have that at Collecticon last year. Collecticon last year was mostly sealed packs I got most of my sales from, and I didn't bring any raw to Collecticon, so I didn't sell any of that. And then on top of that, hardly anyone bought any actual graded cards from me at Collecticon. So Collecticon, if it wasn't for me, you know, seeking out buyers for some of these sealed packs that I had, would have been kind of a bust last year. But at this show, there was a lot more collectors, vendors actually wanted to buy. I sold quite a few higher end cards to vendors that were walking around, and collectors were there looking for actual graded cards. I sold quite a few of like evolutions or starters, you know, those popular Pokemon that do very well that I tend to try and specialize in. But for the most part, it was a lot slower than I thought it would be. But it was weird because when you looked over at the other side of the room, it was full of people playing the game. But a lot of those people didn't make it over here because a lot of us were Pokemon and they weren't holding Pokemon tournaments. That all being said, at the end of the day, for one day, I still did fairly decently. I moved some stuff that I've been sitting on for a little while, and I moved some stuff at really decent prices. There wasn't a whole lot of haggling back and forth. I was worried that there was going to be a lot of people, you know, spouting last sold auction numbers at me for comps. There really wasn't that. Everyone was looking at my cases saying that my prices were really good. Oh, you should actually increase the price on that, yada, yada, yada. And overall, I had $1,449 in sales for the one day that I attended. It was a 2-day event, but because I did decent enough on the first day, I didn't really want to do the second day with some other things that was going on that Sunday. That would have really burned me out because this was a 2 9-hour day convention. It was 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Saturday and Sunday, and that would have destroyed my entire weekend. And although it would have been a lot of fun to go on the second day as well, I'm happy that sales performed well on the first day, that I didn't have to go back on day 2. Now, I did get 2 tables, and I was really surprised by the size of the tables. I walked in, I think they were 10 or 12 foot tables. They were freaking massive. They were like 2 Collecticon tables in one. So I probably could have gotten away with just doing 1 table, but I opted for 2. And when I got there, I was glad to have the extra space. The 2 tables were $180, and it was weird. They actually had you pay on the day. So you didn't pay prior to the event like you do, like I've done with every other event that I've done. It was, I signed up for the tables. They were like, all right, we've got your name down, good to go. We'll collect payment on Saturday. And then they came around at like 3 or 4 in the afternoon on Saturday and collected payment from you. It was maybe kind of a courtesy thing, even though I would have preferred to pay in advance. I think it's kind of a courtesy thing of like, you can pay us with the stuff that you sell. We don't need your money in advance sort of thing. So those are my thoughts on the overall event. I did have a good time while I was there. It was a long day, but I did sell enough to not have to go back on day 2, and I was very happy to have actually gone and done something new. I did 2 tables by myself this time, so there was a little bit more pressure, but I feel more comfortable now doing that. Lots of learning experiences during this event, but it was fun to do, and I would highly recommend that if you guys haven't vended before, you should check out some of your local places. We are the hot commodity right now, so if you're interested in vending, reach out to some people, say that you specialize in Pokemon, and give it a shot and see how it goes. I've had a lot of fun with it so far, and hopefully you will too.